Okay. It's another episode in a series of very unscripted episodes that will probably be incredibly just transient and exploratory and hopefully a little bit fun. Right now in my career, I have the really good fortune and the privilege to kind of work across a number of different sectors, a number of different industries, and a number of different jobs. It's a lot of fun. I am primarily anchored in academia because my full-time job is at a university, but I get to work in industry a lot. I am an entrepreneur, so I own a few businesses, and I've been working really hard to kind of develop those businesses. And I've worked for many years in policy, so I've worked for the United Nations International Telecommunications Union to develop policy in areas of international development and disability rights and innovation. And all that work has been really, really fun. But the value that I've gotten out of that has been so much greater because I have been able to work across those different sectors. I think if I had been buried in academia, in my job, in my office, just teaching and doing research day in and day out, I think that the impact that I have been able to achieve would not have been possible because I wouldn't have been able to see the horizon very well. I would only have been seeing kind of the box that was right in front of me that was like, okay, get that grant proposal, get that paper written, teach this class, and move on to the next proposal, the next grant, the next research project, and the next class. So the joy for me in this part of my career has been having the opportunity to kind of do some really intense work with a group, jump back out, jump into a different group, do some really intense work, jump out, and kind of do that in a number of different domains and a number of different sectors and a number of different countries too. I think that's the other element that's really benefited my work, being able to operate in the United States, in countries like Norway and Ukraine and Uganda, being able to see the different business environments, be able to see the different academic environments, and being able to work across all these different domains has just expanded my mind. And the one key factor here is that I've never gone into these settings with any kind of preconceived notions of the way things should be done. I think the value that I've gotten personally out of all this, and I hope the value that I've then brung to the table, is just being able to start posing some of the important questions that we should be asking ourselves or that we may want to ask ourselves. So I never have really taken a very strong position when I come into these different environments. I really treat them kind of like a scientist and just explore. I'm just there to kind of figure out what's going on. And again, to kind of ask the right questions or ask questions that hopefully will lead to some compelling and interesting and provocative answers. I started my career in industry, so my first job out of university, and even my jobs in university to a certain extent, were really industrial focused. So I didn't have kind of the traditional academic route where you kind of do a bachelor's, master's, PhD, boom, 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 and you just stay in academia your whole life. I started kind of as a programmer, more or less. I finished a business degree. I had taken some programming classes, and there was a job opportunity at a local company. I went to work there. It was a multinational, so it was a site within a multinational company. And they had me doing some administrative stuff at first, and eventually I took over a role as a programmer, a database developer, and a web developer, and taught a lot of the job to myself. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton in the process. I learned the kind of, well, I won't put I'll say it very kind of not so kind way, the brutality of what it is to work in a corporate company. And there's a lot that goes with that, but it'll be for a different episode. The point here is I started off my academic career working in industry and trying to learn the basics of professional practice in business. And that gave me a good anchoring, a solid anchoring when I went into academia to approach my work not as this kind of high-minded kind of, I'm just here to explore this field, but actually be directed and focused in on a goal and an ambition in my research and in my work. Now, that doesn't mean that I didn't have an academic career-ish during that time. I was always working as a teaching assistant. I was always working kind of as a research assistant on different projects, but that was really part-time. And for me, I would have done it for free. It was so much fun. I just didn't even care if they paid me. And let's be honest, it was a student assistant job, so I didn't get paid a ton of money, but it was a little bit extra money on top of my full-time job. It wasn't until more or less I started, well, it wasn't even graduate school. It was the end of my graduate school, end of my master's degree, that I started making that transition from industry into academia. Now, at that time, I was working full-time in university administration, working in the tech department. And that was a lot of fun as well. I got to kind of see a behind-the-scenes look at a lot of the academic life and kind of suss out some of the key players in any academic institution, learn about priorities in most universities and these sorts of things. But as my career progressed and I started getting more and more into research, I started getting part-time jobs as research assistants and research fellows, did a lot of desk research, did a lot of primary research. And in that process, my mindset kind of changed from what it is to work in industry where there's these kind of really tight deadlines and you got to get things done for a certain specific purpose and is really driven, really ambitious, to, and let's just be honest here, academic timelines are a little bit more, a little bit laxer, I guess you could say. They're a little bit more long-term than a lot of industrial deadlines, which may be weeks and months, and then academic deadlines can kind of be like years in the making. Like I have a project now that's going to run for 3 years. And a lot of times in industry, unless you're working at a really high level, you're probably not working on that kind of a timeline. And so I think that transition really helped to change my mindset into thinking a lot more longer term and a lot more strategically, a lot less about what am I going to do on the output side of things, what am I going to produce, and a lot more in terms of what am I going to change, how is the knowledge that I'm going to create going to make a difference in the lives of human beings and in society in general. And one of the things I was exposed to at the time was the difference between, I was studying public health, so the difference between medicine and public health being kind of a broader view, a population level view that kind of goes maybe an inch deep, but then health or medicine being more a individual view and being a mile deep because you're going to save that person's life in a lot of ways. And I mean, this is just a general characterization. This is just my interpretation. So, take it for what it is, take it for what it's worth. And so when I started thinking about these more incremental changes that I could be making as an academic and as somebody working in the field of public health, it really opened my eyes to the need for longer term thinking, the need for even intergenerational thinking. So not even how can I affect things in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, but how can I affect things, how can I affect changes that will impact generations to come? And so the time horizon suddenly went from, getting something done that week to getting something done that would affect time in, 50 years down the road, and kind of the imagination that you go through as a young professional kind of going, wow, what I could do could really have that kind of impact. And then, of course, realizing in that process that it probably won't have that kind of impact, but it would be nice. It was really transformative. It really changed the way I saw myself, my role in society, and definitely my work. Now, academia is always going to be a little bit more ambitious, in my opinion, than the actual impact that it makes. Academia can make a really, really big impact. It's really, really important that we have an academic sector. But I think a lot of times individual researchers can sometimes have egos that are a little bit more inflated than their impact that they're actually creating. I've always tried to remain humble in my work. And, I often joke that the papers that I write, if they get read by one other human being, then I will be very grateful and fortunate. And that's the way academia can be sometimes. It can be really, it can just remind you of how small you are in the face of everything. Because you're in the cutting edge of your field. If you're working in academia long enough, then you will have developed a profile that will be fairly unique. If you won't be the only expert in your field, you'll be the one of maybe 10 experts in your field who have achieved what you've achieved. And so that all brought with it a lot of self-reflection, a lot of opportunities for learning to think in different ways, to think in new ways. And recently, in the last few years, I've taken a stronger turn towards entrepreneurship. And I've done a lot of work in the last, say, 3 to 5 years, developing new businesses, developing new business models, new business practices, and really trying to launch a series of initiatives focused on creating more grassroots change. And that's given me a really cool opportunity to start translating all the academic knowledge that I've had into actual professional practice. And that's never something I really consciously thought about. I always thought about in my academic career more as kind of just described, where you're making a small change here in year, whatever it is, 2021. And then hopefully maybe someday, if 1 out of 100 chance that it'll make some sort of change in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years down the line. I never for once imagined that I could take my knowledge and my expertise that I had gained over the majority of my career and actually apply it to salient problems that exist in society now, and that I could actually do something with that. I could actually put it into practice. And so my entrepreneurship journey, my journey as an entrepreneur, has really been focused on exactly that, trying to transform and translate some of that knowledge, some of that expertise into something more immediately tangible, focused around a product or a service or some sort of intervention that could be available and could exist in the world around us. So I guess the takeaway here is that certainly my career was not linear in any stretch of the imagination. I describe it here as these series of transitions. And while those transitions were key junctures, they were key turning points in my life, my interest in industry, academia, entrepreneurship were always kind of running in parallel with each other. And so what I often tell my students, especially when they're in their early careers, is just gain as much experience as you can, learn about as many different areas as you can. And as you get older, you're going to learn how to tie these different fields together. And you're going to kind of braid this rope of knowledge and skills and abilities that as you advance in your career will become stronger and stronger and stronger. So my call to action here, if you're thinking about your career in one dimension, I'm going to study medicine and become a doctor, and that's going to be it. I would strongly encourage you to get what's called an avocation or an avocation. I don't know how to pronounce it, one of those ways. This basically means a hobby that you develop into a skill set. And I think there's so much value in that. And I don't care if you're a scientist and you want to study art and music, or if you're a musician and you want to study biology, go for it. These areas of expertise, these kind of parallel areas of expertise that you can develop are absolutely critical for your ability to be able to transcend your focused career and be able to respond to changing conditions and changing opportunities.